plate. Fucking shit.
Democrats have passed a key component of President Biden's agenda, approving a $1 trillion package to overhaul the nation's infrastructure. As NPR's Dave Mistich reports, the measure passed late Friday after clearing the Senate in August.
House members voted to send the $1 trillion infrastructure package to the president for his signature.
On this vote, the yeas are 228 and the nays are 206. The motion is adopted.
The vote followed a pledge from 5 House moderates to support a separate $1.75 trillion social spending package during the week of November 15th. once there's a total financial estimate from the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. The group of moderates say if the financial score is inconsistent with White House estimates, they remain committed to working to resolve any discrepancies. The social spending bill has remained in limbo over lingering disagreements between moderate and progressive Democrats. Dave Mistich, NPR News.
The fiancé of one of the men shot by Kyle Rittenhouse testified Friday during his trial in Kenosha, Wisconsin. Rittenhouse faces charges of homicide and other felonies for fatally shooting 2 people and wounding a third during protests last year following the police shooting of a black man, Jacob Blake. Chuck Wormbach of member station WUWM reports.
Kyle Rittenhouse claims he shot the 3 men in self-defense. Carrie Ann Swart was the fiancée of the first man Rittenhouse killed, Joseph Rosenbaum. On the witness stand, Swart said she watched video of the incident shortly after learning of Rosenbaum's death.
I broke down, and I can't get that image out of my head.
Swart testified that she had told Rosenbaum not to go near the areas of civil unrest. Defense lawyers say Rosenbaum eventually tried to grab Rittenhouse's gun. For NPR News, I'm Chuck Wormbach in Kenosha.
The United Nations Climate Conference continues in Glasgow, Scotland. U.S. Envoy John Kerry says the meeting is off to a promising start. The delegates are showing a greater sense of urgency than at previous meetings. Kerry says several nations have promised to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions to zero over the next 30 years. However, many activists are less impressed. Swedish teenager Greta Thunberg said countries are talking a lot but accomplishing little.
The COP has turned into a PR event where leaders are giving beautiful speeches and announcing fancy commitments and targets. While behind the curtains, the governments of the global north countries are still refusing to take any drastic climate action.
Thousands of young people marched through the streets of Glasgow Friday, demanding the world leaders take more action. This is NPR News.
After nearly 3 weeks of jury selection, lawyers presented their opening statements today in the racially fueled murder trial of 3 white men charged in the killing of Ahmaud Arbery. The 25-year-old black man was shot to death last year while jogging down a residential road. A nearly all-white jury is hearing the case. NPR's Debbie Elliott has been at the courthouse in Brunswick, Georgia today and joins us now. And Debbie, you've been following this for some time. Give us the context. Who are these defendants?
Father and son, Gregory and Travis McMichael, and then one of their neighbors, William Roddy Bryan. The 3 are charged with murder, aggravated assault, and false imprisonment for chasing Ahmaud Arbery in pickup trucks, cornering him, and then shooting him to death on February 23rd of 2020. Arrest did not come until cell phone video of the killing was leaked, and it was recorded by the defendant Bryan and drew the national attention to this case.
Prosecutors were, of course, the first to present their case. How did they begin?
Well, they're using that video. That's very central to their case, along with 911 phone calls and police body cam videos. In her opening statement, prosecutor Linda Dunikoski highlighted what she described as a series of driveway decisions that took a young man's life, decisions the defendants made based on their assumptions that Ahmaud Arbery didn't belong in the Satilla Shores neighborhood where they lived. They had previously seen him walking into a house under construction there, and on the day he was killed, she says, they saw him running down the street, grabbed their guns, and gave chase. She played the cell phone video showing how the 3 men trapped him.
Mr. Arbery's under attack. He's being driven forward by Mr. Bryan in his pickup truck. He's running away from this pickup truck. It's already tried to hit him 4 times. Toward McMichael's. Travis McMichael is out of the car with his shotgun.
She said the medical examiner will testify that the first close-range blast from the shotgun was fatal.
How did defense attorneys respond?
Well, first, there's no disputing that the men chased Arbery and that Travis McMichael killed him. Defense lawyers say the trial is really about why. They argue that the men were justified because this was a neighborhood on edge after a series of property thefts. They had seen surveillance video of Arbery at the house under construction 4 different times at night and had been on the lookout for him. Travis McMichael's attorney, Robert Rubin, said his client had confronted Arbery on the site a time before and saw Arbery reach into his pocket, so McMichael thought he was armed, and that's why he reacted as he did when Arbery tried to fight back when he was running between those pickup trucks.
And within a split second, Ahmaud Arbery makes a left and is on Travis, such that Travis has no choice but to fire his weapon in self-defense. When they collide, it's on Travis, and Travis has to fight. Because at that point, it's his life or Ahmaud Arbery's life.
So the defense says that these men were trying to make a citizen's arrest that turned tragic when Arbery fought back.
This was also the first day the jury was able to hear testimony. What was put before them?
The first witness was Glenn County Police Officer William Duggan, one of the first to respond to the scene. He testified that when he asked Travis McMichael if he was okay, he responded, "No, I'm not okay. I just effing killed somebody." And then the state played this graphic body cam video that shows him over Arbery's bloody body. It was difficult to see.
That's NPR's Debbie Elliott at the Glenn County Courthouse. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Wells Fargo. Wells Fargo's small business checking offers greater efficiency and control over daily finances so you can bank without missing a beat. Learn more about Wells Fargo's small business checking at wellsfargo.com.
Hi, I'm Zachary from Salt Lake City, Utah, and I'm 8 years old. And I'm Cameron, and I just turned 5. We're so excited. We just got our COVID vaccine. And then this podcast was recorded at
1:08 p.m. Eastern Time on Friday, November 5th.
Things may have changed by the time you hear this. We're off to get ice cream now.
Oh, wow.
I bet that's some very tasty ice cream, particularly for their parents.
Yes. Well, hey there. It's the NPR Politics Podcast. I'm Asma Khalid. I cover the White House.
I'm Aisha Roscoe. I also cover the White House.
And I'm Kelsey Snell. I cover Congress.
So we were all expecting to see some votes in Congress today on some of the president's big infrastructure and economic proposals. It does not look, as of now, like those votes are coming together. But Kelsey, it does feel like Democrats get, halfway close to passing Biden's $1 trillion+ agenda almost every week, and then it never seems to manage to reach the finish line. We're going to talk more about that in just a minute, but let's begin with some of the policy, because it does seem like we have a clearer sense of what is actually in at least one of these bills, the Democratic reconciliation bill. Is that right?
Well, that's right. And, we're lucky that we have timestamps on this podcast because, things in this situation really might change before the end of the day today. Democrats are really working hard to try to get this bill. We sometimes hear it talked about as Biden's social spending package. Sometimes we talk about it as Build Back Better. But what it is about $1.5 to $1.75 trillion in spending on everything from universal pre-K and, assistance for childcare to climate change and housing. It is a really big, big bill. So just to kind of give an overview of some of the major things that we talk about when we're talking about this bill, it's got about $550 billion to address climate change. There is money to extend the expanded child tax credit. That's the monthly payment that most families are getting right now, extending that for another year. There's money in there to pay for 4 weeks of paid family and medical leave. Universal pre-K for children 3 and 4 years old all across the country. It's a huge bill. There are also measures in there to address housing affordability and housing shortages. We've talked about this in the past as a bill that's been scaled back from Biden's original ambitions, but it is really still huge. $1.75 trillion is an enormous amount of money, and it is largely focused on social spending that we haven't seen on this scale really since the New Deal.
So Kelsey, you've outlined a lot about what's in this bill, but presumably lawmakers in the House did have to decide to throw some things out. So what did they decide to leave out?
Well, one of the things that we're running into right now is a fight over whether or not some of these things I already mentioned should be left out. So they are still trying to figure out a path forward on paid family and medical leave. That is something that House Democrats included in this bill, but it may end up getting stripped out once the bill moves over to the Senate. In fact, it very likely will, because Senator Joe Manchin really still has a lot of objections to including it in a partisan bill. He says he wants to deal with it, if at all, on a bipartisan basis. There's also disagreement about what to do about changes to the immigration laws, and it's not clear to me now that any changes to immigration can even pass the Senate rules for a budget reconciliation bill, which require it to be, any measure to be primarily related to the budget. So, this is, as much as it is a bill that they've been fighting about for weeks in the House just to get it over the finish line, it is ultimately just the first step in a really long process.
And Kelsey, is that part of the issue that, because it seems like things are a bit held up in the House right now, is the concern from Democrats that they pass this bill and then they don't know what's going to happen in the Senate?
A little bit of that, and a little bit that they, the elections earlier this week, particularly in Virginia and New Jersey, have some centrist House Democrats really shaken. They are worried about voting on a bill before they get the full score from, the budgetary scorekeepers, the nonpartisan scorekeepers in Congress. That's the Congressional Budget Office. They want to see exactly how all of this spending breaks down and how it compares to the new tax changes that they would expect to pay for it. They don't want to go into a vote and say that, they voted for a spending bill that they didn't know how it would directly affect the economy, and they don't know how to talk about it to their constituents. Whether or not this becomes the final bill, they want some certainty about anything that they sign their name onto.
That does feel a bit wonky. I mean, when is that analysis from the Congressional Budget Office actually expected?
We're not totally certain. I mean, it could take weeks. I have talked to some budget experts who say that because there are so many new policies in here, it takes a long time to try to figure out what the economic effects would be. It's one thing when the Congressional Budget Office is asked to estimate the cost of a policy that already exists, just extending it or making a small change to it, a new iteration of something that already exists. But it's an entirely different question to ask them to do full economic modeling on how a brand new policy would work and how it would potentially impact the economy over a decade.
I mean, so is something going to pass today? Are they going to get something done? Because I know you have your crystal ball.
I mean, Nancy Pelosi seemed to suggest last night that it was supposed to happen, right?
Well, it has been supposed to happen so many times now that I have thrown away my crystal ball and I just throw my hands up in the air and say, we'll just keep asking questions and seeing where things go, because attempting to predict whether or not this will pass today has taken up so much energy and brain space. It's been almost futile so far. So we will keep asking those questions, but I don't know.
But someone who definitely does want this to pass today and feels like these two bills should have been passed already is President Joe Biden. He did talk today about the job numbers, but he also talked about how he feels like the economy is recovering, but to really turbocharge the economy, he says that that Congress needs to pass these two bills.
Well, yeah, I mean, this is so much of what Biden ran on. I mean, the whole concept, and you guys were there through this entire thing, was he was talking about repairing parts of the economy, parts of the American social structure that were already not working equitably before the pandemic, and then the pandemic exposed it. This is what Democrats said that they were going to attempt to address. A lot of that is in this bill. That's what they say that they're trying to do with this bill. And if they can't move forward on it, it speaks to, the way that Biden can work with Congress, the way Democrats can govern, whether or not they can deliver on promises, whether or not their vision for the country actually unites their own party. There are a lot of things on the line here for Biden in particular, and it doesn't always, the size of his coalition and the wide range of political views within the Democratic Party makes it really difficult to follow through on a lot of those promises.
Kelsey, you mentioned Virginia and New Jersey earlier, and the hesitation that some moderates have in voting possibly for such large spending packages. But on the flip side, there are, more liberal members of the House who feel like perhaps the way to interpret some of the more abysmal election results that Democrats saw this past week is because of the fact that Democrats have not passed anything. I mean, their argument is, give voters something to vote for and give them a sense that you've actually accomplished what you set out to do. And I'm curious how that's playing out in the House.
That is playing out every single day in conversations with members that I have. I mean, this was to some degree predictable, right? Because Biden put together a coalition of, having people who were, former Republicans who felt that they were turned off by the Republican Party under Trump, and people who were big Bernie Sanders supporters. They all came together to elect Joe Biden to the presidency, and now they are attempting to govern together as one single party with very different ideas about how to approach, very similar frustrations and fears and problems that they see in the world.
And it does seem that everyone from the election took the lesson that was like in line with their worldview, right? So the progressives say we should have went bigger, and the moderates say, see, this shows we should have went smaller. And it just seems like everyone took the lesson that they wanted to take.
So Kelsey, both the Senate and the House are out next week. That's my understanding. So what happens now? What happens after today?
Well, if the House is able to pass this, the hope among Democrats was that they could spend next week going through or at least starting to go through the very complicated process of bringing this bill to the Senate parliamentarian to make sure that it meets the basic rules for budget reconciliation. And that process can take a long time. So I think the hope for a lot of Democrats was that they could start that while the Senate isn't in session, and then kind of speed things along when they get back.
All right, well, thanks as always, Kelsey, and don't go too far away because you're going to come back in a bit for Can't Let It Go.
I am sticking very close by.
All right, we are going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we'll talk about jobs and inflation.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Grifols. Senior Director of Corporate Affairs, Vlasta Hakes, explains the science behind the plasma-derived medicines the company produces.
Plasma contains proteins and antibodies. There are people who are missing those antibodies, or they're missing a protein that helps their body function. And what Grifols